Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the NTA Australia New Zealand Vodcast. I'm Sarah Fieschi. I am an assistant instructor for NTA Australia New Zealand. Today, we're going to be talking about something every kid does, but also every human, so adults and kids alike. We do this activity thousands of times a day without thinking about it, and that is breathing. Today, we're going to dive into all things kids breathwork with Adrienne Rivera, a breathwork facilitator who specializes in working with children and teens, but also adults. She's here to unpack why something as simple as the breath is one of the most underused tools for supporting kids' mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Adrienne, it's so wonderful to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Adrienne, I've given a brief intro, but how about we kick off today's conversation with you by telling us a little bit about yourself and what first drew you to the realm of breathwork, and how did your journey lead you down the path of working with kids in terms of breathwork?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I started out first working with adults. So that was my main thing. And of course, I found breathwork first. And how I found it for myself personally was just through a random workshop. It wasn't random though. I do believe that the universe gives us everything when we're ready for it. And so I was able to attend that workshop and I experienced circular connected breath, which is something that we do mostly for adults that is more for trauma release and it's a bigger journey. And I found myself crying, releasing so much, and having this realization that there's so much power within our breath and that everything we're looking for lies within our breath. And so that was really profound for me at that time because I was looking for everything outside of myself. I was looking for happiness in a man or a relationship. I was, using food for comfort and to fill a void. And so I was just constantly finding myself looking external rather than going within. And it wasn't until I found breathwork for myself personally that I healed a lot of stuff. I transitioned the way that I thought about my childhood and my upbringing to really rewrite the story and narrative of some of the things that were challenging before and found a lot of inner freedom from that. And so I wanted to help other people, got multiple breathwork certifications, did a lot of training. And then I found that there were a few missing gaps from what I had learned. And I had some experiences leading people in breathwork that got me thinking, okay, there's way more here. There's a lot going on, and that is why I created the breathwork for adults, the trauma-informed certification, which is 4 months. And then naturally, we attracted a lot of moms that came to us saying, I want something for myself again. My kids are about to be back in school. I would love to start a business, help my community. And they weren't looking for something, like back at an office. They wanted something meaningful and they wanted something that they could do on the side, as well as be with their kids and participate and go into the schools and volunteer, but also have an expertise to bring. So that was something that we noticed that a lot of moms were asking, like, hey, I love the certification and the couple modules that you have about helping kids are great. Like, any chance you have anything more? And so that was really what sparked us. And we asked a few people, like, hey, if we were to create a specific Breathwork for Kids certification, would you be interested? And they're like, yes, we'd love to help our kids in a deeper way. I think kids need this. And it really connected to my heart because I think back to little Adrienne, the past version of myself, and I really could have used breath work. Growing up, I was never taught mindfulness or any of these strategies of being aware of my body. And there were some struggles that I feel that if I would have known about breath work, I could have definitely helped myself. One of the things was that I grew up with ADHD. And so I think that that could have really helped me focus in school and better understand myself. And then also, in high school, I struggled with binge eating disorder. So that was 6 tough years of my life. And with that, I didn't fully have the connection that I have now with my body. And a way to process some of the deeper things. And I think a lot of times people who struggle with eating disorders, it's because they have some sort of sense of control around something. Even though with binge eating, it kind of feels like the food has the control. It's like this weird thing. But I think anyone here listening who's experienced that can resonate with that. So yeah, the breath is something healthy and natural that we have control over at all times. And I really see breath work being crucial for kids of all ages. If you were to ask me, like, which kids need it most, naturally, I struggled most in high school. So I want to say high schoolers, with confidence and being connected to yourself and moving through bigger emotions. I grew up on swim team and I was really trying to make it to states. And I know this now that if I would have worked on my breathing, I could have improved my carbon dioxide tolerance and been faster at swimming. But that was something that I wasn't aware of. So I just kept trying harder, and I didn't think that my breath could be this amazing tool. But the earlier we start training the breath, the earlier we have awareness. And humans developed conscious control over their breath when we started to speak, when we started to communicate. It like happened at the same time that we are, consciously evolved on this planet. If we look around on the planet, like humans have done a lot of things, right, with roads and infrastructure and buildings. So the consciousness of the breath is key. And the issue that I see a lot is that we see a lot of parents that are stressed out from work and they come home and they're chest breathing or they're holding their breath. And what happens is that kids don't really care about what you say, they care about what you do. And that's why a lot of mannerisms are similar when you look at a child and their parent. And so, unconsciously, without even thinking of it, they look to their parents and they start breathing that way. Babies were born perfect breathers, but then as soon as their parents have some stress, the child then learns that. And so then the child is growing up with this nervous system that is starting to feel stressed for perhaps no reason. And kids are very sensitive, they're very intuitive. I do believe that, like they really feel energy. And so I think that with this conversation, it's really important to look at the relationship between the parent and the child, and that breath is a tool that is modeled by the parent, that the parent is modeling proper breathing and working towards that. And when those things are done, especially when the parent is breathing with the child, then they start to care about it. It's no longer this psychological thing of like, you're too much, you need to do your breathing exercises, which would never work. But instead, it's like, Mommy's feeling a little bit stressed right now. I know that breathing helps me. How about we take a hug right now and we just breathe into our bellies together, right? Like, so doing something together that's for you to calm down, but also co-regulation, which is the best type, the most effective type of breath work for a child. The fastest is going to be co-regulation. But of course, the goal is that they don't need to always co-regulate, that they have these skills when you're gone and that they work on it. One of our Breathwork for Kids student graduates, she worked with her son every single day, like every single day of the certification. And she sent me a message saying, Adrienne, I'm so happy. He went outside after a big day at school. He sat in his little place in the backyard and he went and did his breathing on his own because he knew the benefits. He knew that this is something that we practiced, we trained, and he went to do it on his own. And she was so proud. And, it's not just the power of breath work, though. She was really diligent. And like training anything, you've got to be consistent with it. And she did a great job with that.
Well, there's so much to unpack there of what you've spoken about, Adrienne. Thank you so much. The breath and other mindfulness activities certainly are not activities that we are taught, that are
Mhm.
spoken about, maybe more so now, but certainly not, going back in time. Even I'm thinking
Yeah.
about when I was a child, like it was absolutely not there at all. So it is, it's really refreshing that we are now having more of these discussions as adults, but also then having them with children and practicing them also with children, and the whole co-regulation piece, um, you know, really does sort of, I feel that quite profoundly, because I have three children, and I've been looking at ways that we can co-regulate. Um, And you're totally right. When someone's, if there's a little bit of tension in the house with one of the family members, sure enough, there's going to be tension that is shared across the household in absolutely no time. And that can be, obviously, that's the negative side of it. But the positive can be that we can turn that around really quickly too when we as adults are working on our regulation, and that is supporting the regulation of our children or the children within our care. So we have that co-regulation element going on. And you mentioned babies are perfect breathers. And I remember when my little ones were babies and even toddlers and their belly would expand, you're like, that's so interesting, because back then I didn't know what I know now,
Yeah.
especially after moving through your certification course. But that belly expand like a balloon and then a retract, and it was really, really interesting to see that. And it'd be so different when I'd look at myself breathing.
Mhm.
Um, so really interesting when you mention that they then start to pick up the breathing pattern of the parents, caregivers, adults that they're around. Again,
Yes.
feeding into that
And
co-regulation.
another thing too that you made me think of is I see this a lot with teens, and I also had this pattern as a teen that, I have a very specific memory, and maybe people can relate, like prom pictures. What do? You're wearing your nice flattering dress. The girls put their arms around everyone else, they smile, and it's as if you can hear at the same time when the cameraman is saying 1, 2, 3, all the girls suck in their belly to look more thin, to look more attractive. God forbid you'd breathe into your belly and you might look pregnant, you might look overweight, right? And that's a real thing. And so that type of self-consciousness can actually turn into one of the dysfunctional breathing patterns, which is called reverse breathing. So on the inhale, the belly should expand, and on the exhale, the belly should come in. But a reverse breather pulls it in on the inhale and then pulls it out. And so that is what I was for a while. And there's also irregular breathers who do that sometimes and they hold their breath sometimes. So I was all over the place. Chest breathers, which is all wiring your nervous system to be stressed out. And yeah, the way that you repattern your natural breath really has the biggest lasting impact on how you are as a person, because your natural operating system becomes more parasympathetic dominant.
When you mentioned about the sucking in for a photo, also the clothing as well,
Mhm.
depending on
Tight
what
clothes.
fashion, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, amongst the teens, but also young adults and, fully blown adults as well, as to what you're wearing and how that feels and how you can actually expand in that breath or not. And
Yeah.
how that might be restricting breath or changing that natural pattern.
Hmm.
I think I've been a reverse breather for probably much of my life as well, until I came into this whole breathwork realm and really learned what is it about. And I really did struggle with expanding my belly for quite some time. It
Yeah.
didn't come
Same.
natural
It
to
was
me.
not natural and it took me a long time. That might be surprising for people to hear, but that is the honest truth. I found circular connected breath, the breath work to heal trauma, so much easier than actually doing natural breathing. Natural breathing was the hardest type of breath work for me. It was like, wait a second, this feels crazy to breathe into my belly. And I actually do have a theory around that. I believe that we hold a lot of fear as tension in the body. And there's great books on this, like The Body Keeps the Score, about how traumas can stay stuck in the body. But for me, I think that there were some things that I didn't yet release that caused me to feel like, oh, it's not safe to breathe low into the belly. So there was like a holding pattern. And so through some of that deeper trauma release style of breath work, circular connected breath, I did find that it was significantly easier to breathe lower into my belly. And that was very helpful and very supportive. But, sometimes we have to have those deeper journeys to kind of move through some bigger energies so that then we can kind of settle into, proper breathing more easily. And people here who are listening, maybe you're also thinking or looking down at your belly, like, is my belly moving right now? If it's challenging for you or you're not seeing much, one of the easiest ways we can do this is by lying down first. The gravity makes it so much easier. So that's where I always start working with people, where they're lying down, the belly rises and falls. Sometimes, if this still feels challenging, we put something on the belly so that there's a visual of something rising and falling. For adults, maybe it's a small book. For kids, it's a little stuffed animal. We call it teddy bear breathing, and that's one of the best ways that we can train the breath to breathe natural. So that's a great place to start. I will say that once people kind of master that and then they go to seated or standing, it is still sometimes challenging for them. But you have a good point that, like, the clothes they wear matters. They should feel comfortable in what they're wearing. And it is a practice. And I notice myself some days even not being perfect, where I'm like, an email might come through that I'm like, here I am holding my breath again. And so I want everyone here listening to know that it's normal. It's like we learn the pattern and then we sometimes veer off, and then we come back to the pattern, and then we come and we veer off again. So that's normal. It's part about being a human. And your breath is always changing. When you think about how you're breathing when you're crying, it is breath work. When you think about how you're breathing when you're laughing, it is also breath work. Something that crying and laughing have in common is that the body will quiver and quake. And so something common in circular connected breath, the trauma release for adults, is that the crying and laughing look very similar. And sometimes, very often, when someone's crying really hard, they will then start laughing, and vice versa. Someone's laughing really hard because it's an energy release, then they start crying. And in my mind, it's the same. The body is just quivering, quaking to release that energy. And when we look at animals in nature, like deer, they do this as well. If they're crossing the road, they see a car. At first, they go into that freeze response, but then they go into the flight. They get out of the road, hopefully, and then they start shaking. They shake it off. And dogs do this as well. If a dog kind of growls at another one and then you walk past, you'll see your dog who walked past, like, shake it off and just kind of, whew, okay, we're good. Like, it's a reset. And that's why there's many ways to support in releasing energy, and shaking is a great one. I think it's great for children, for moms, for adults. Anyone of any age can just benefit from shaking and visualizing that you're shaking away any tension, shaking away anything in the body. And yeah, when it comes to breath work for kids and teaching breath work to kids, I want people to know that there are so many things that pair beautifully with the breath. So we talked about co-regulation. We talked about a parent giving their child a hug, breathing together, because that's going to calm you down, which is going to make you less reactive as well. But one of the things that I love talking about that shifts people faster, in my opinion, like especially kids, faster than actual breath work, is the energy of play. Play is the secret recipe. If you've got two fighting siblings in the room and they're not getting along and they're in their head and they're not fully seeing each other eye to eye, the quickest thing you can do is get them to play, and then they're gone. They're fine. Everything is gone and they're completely reset. So yeah, that's something that parents can even do with a child. It's like, oh, you're feeling sad. Okay, let's shift the energy. Let's shift the environment and see if we can get you to play. Switching it up, because the thing about children, especially young children, is that they process emotions and energy in the moment. So they're happy and then oops, they fell. Now they're crying because they're processing that sadness, and then it will pass very soon. It might be very intense, but it will pass very soon. And to kind of just tell parents that that is normal. The best thing you can do is let your kid cry. Crying is actually very healthy. It is also still breath work. It's how they move big energy. But then we can shift quickly to play. We can get them to process their emotions. If they fell, maybe they're being a little dramatic about it. Maybe we can tell them, you're okay. And they say, oh, I guess I am okay. Maybe they just wanted some attention, some love. Kids are funny the way that they work with their psychology, but really they just want a connection with you. And the best way that humans feel connection is through bonding on the same level. And this is something that I see is very powerful. My biggest advice is, when working with anyone, especially kids, be whatever age they are. So if it's a 3-year-old, be a 3-year-old. If it's a teen, be a teen. And that's what I do. I'm kind of like a chameleon with whoever I'm helping. And there was a child at a friend's house recently, and she's 3 years old, and I could tell she was bored. You could just see it on her face. She's bored. And I felt bad. I saw my inner child in her. I'm like, she just wants to play. There's all these boring adults around her. Let's just go play. And my husband and I, we just got a puppy. So we were bringing the puppy there. And I said, oh, hey, you want to go play with a puppy? Do you like puppies? And instantly we were friends. And then we were playing all these things. Kids are so creative. We started doing crawling races in the grass. And then she says, now we're kitties, meow, meow. It's like, okay, this is weird and fun. Just go with it. And it may last forever, but try things until they work. It's funny. I even said to her, I'm like, let's try to do cartwheels. 3-year-olds apparently can't do cartwheels. I learned that. And so quickly my mind shifts to what can she do to create a quick win? Because you want kids to build confidence. So every single day you have an opportunity for them to do something right. This goes back to breath work. If you give them a breath work that they're not getting, like proper breathing, don't focus so much on that. Focus on things that they can do right and positively reinforce that behavior so that they learn faster. So for the child who couldn't do the cartwheels, I said, oh, hey, here's a hula hoop. You want to jump through the hoop? And she jumped through the hoop. Yay! Jump through the hoop. Yay! She says, again, again. Yay! And she just keeps jumping. And in my head, I'm like, wow, this will never end. She'll be jumping through this hoop for hours. And of course, it'll tire her out. It'll be good for her. And she was having so much fun. And it was so playful. And I do believe that kids need the energy of human connection and play. My husband was there, and I could see she was getting bored again. And so I engage her again using my human psychology knowledge. And I say, hey, you want to see what my husband's face can do? And we go over to his face, and I touch his nose, and he goes, boop. I touch it again, boop. And then, wah, wah. And she was laughing so hard. And her parents just looked at me like, I have never seen her so happy. I've never seen her laugh so hard. This is amazing. And that showed me that perhaps there was like a lack of creativity with these parents of like, how can I try new things in the moment? And what I love about this story is that there was no screens, no technology, nothing except for being outside and creating things. Kids do best when they're being innovative and they're trying things and they're having fun and they're present in the moment. And when we can make them feel happy and have many memories of like positive enforcement where they felt good about it, they had fun, they are going to raise themselves to be calm, happy adults. And, I think a lot of times I work with both kids and adults. I work with a lot of adults who are grieving their childhood, saying, I had to raise my siblings, my parents were not in the picture, and now I've realized I've never had a childhood. I've never learned how to play and how sad that is. And so, hopefully they don't have to grieve that later on. But the biggest thing that I want to share with, anyone listening who works with kids is make it fun, make sure the kid wins. All of that matters more than the science. I do want to share a little bit about like why the science matters of breathing, because the breath is the remote control to the nervous system. But I will just say, make it fun, give them wins, keep doing what they're already good at. That is going to raise a confident, resilient human.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Adrienne. Make it fun, play, 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 right? With
Yes.
kids. There's so much there when we can get into that, our little kid self, and work with them in that way. Um, and they're very receptive. So with
Mhm.
breath work for kids and breath work for adults, how do they differ? Because I'm guessing the
Mhm.
play, well, I sort of know because I have moved through some work with you, but play element, as you've spoken to us about, that comes into the mix. Um, so talk to us a little bit about the difference in.
Yes, I love this. And one thing that I'll just say on play, I am very passionate about play, and I believe that play, and is research on this, gets us into a different brain state, and it's really supportive. And so I just led a breathwork certification retreat in person for the adult certification. And in there, we mainly teach about trauma release and being trauma informed and using an open mouth activating style of breathwork to process deeper emotions, especially things from the past, but also to gain clarity. And there's a lot of benefits to that. So most adults are looking for that. Doesn't mean they don't also need nervous system regulation and proper breathing. That's why I created something that's called the Breathwork Triangle. And so it goes with our logo. At the top is teaching proper breathing. At the bottom left is down regulating styles of breath work that make the body feel calm and safe and regulated, improve sleep, improving blood pressure. And then on the other side, we have the circular connected breath. And I love this visual of the triangle because I'll be honest, when I first found breath work, all I wanted to do was the deep hyperventilation breath. And I'm like, this is amazing. I feel so expansive. But then I realized, oh, yeah, my proper breathing really could use some work. And yeah, there are nights that I struggle to fall asleep. These are tools that I can use to regulate myself and feel good about it. And so I like the triangle because the triangle is balanced. And so it's showing that all of them are important. All of them have a time and place. One of the fun little play elements that I'll just mention, though, is at the beginning of my retreats, one of the things that I like to do to break the ice are like comedy improv games where people are on their feet, they're connecting with people, they're making eye contact, they're being a little bit silly and goofy, but not in a super kiddish way. Like one of the games that I play is categories. And, you have to think about a category like cars, and then someone saying, like, Porsche, Honda, Ford, and like kind of going back and forth with these cars. That's more of like an adult playful theme. Like a child that's 3 wouldn't know the names of car models or brands, but that would be something that's interesting and gets an adult to think in a creative way of like, what have I seen on the highway recently? And what happens there is a whole lot more than just breaking the ice. They're making eye contact, they're building trust, they're feeling like, oh, people are engaging with me. I feel accepted in this group. It gives them a time to be funny and get things wrong, to then realize like, oh, nothing really matters. If I get something wrong this weekend, I'm okay. And so I'm a big firm believer in play to kind of make everything feel like play, and so that they're not getting it wrong. A lot of times either adults or kids, they freeze up when they feel like they're being tested, or maybe they're learning too much about the science of it. They're just feeling like, if I get this wrong, I'm going to disappoint someone, and that feels like a trauma for a lot of people. And so we want to avoid that by making it around the experience of, let's try this, let's be curious about this, let's see what happens if we do this. Okay, that's not quite right, but let's try this instead. So we want to bring the energy of curiosity, not quite this, but this. It's kind of like training a dog with positive reinforcement. We're training our puppy right now. And so when he chews on something like our shoes, we say trade. It's like, oh, not this, but you can chew on this. And so it's like redirecting the energy. And I think a lot of parents listening can benefit from that, of like, what is the child doing that they're being disruptive? And how can you say, okay, trade, let's give you some coloring books and some pencils. Or, all right, let's go outside. Let's shift the environment. And shifting things quickly gets a new energy. I do believe that adults really benefit from this too. If you're feeling stagnant in an office, if you go on a walk outside, you're going to feel so much better. So shifting up the energy really matters. So going back to what you said about like, how does it differ? For children, we tend to avoid the hyperventilation styles of breathwork, the open mouth breathing, because they're so young and malleable that we're just hoping to train them proper breathing and how to have a calm nervous system. If we do those 2 things, then that's great. When we have teens that are going through bigger emotions, there are some other things that we can do to support them in just processing it, crying it out. That can be a little bit more therapeutic, but we basically look at kids as, okay, the main thing we want is let's just regulate them. And so then with adults, it's like, okay, yes, regulation, but many times they have things from their childhood that they'd like to heal. They'd like to find some clarity. They're ready for some spiritual connection, more of a journey-like experience. So the biggest difference would be the circular connected breath or activating styles of breath work that we do with adults, which is a lot more complex and it requires more skills to facilitate, because you're dealing with humans that have gone through decades of things, and you're helping them to create safety in their body, and we're being mindful to not re-traumatize someone. So we're doing our best to make the person feel seen and heard through skills like active listening, which works great with kids too. In fact, this can be so helpful for kids. Except for it's a little bit different. Like with a adult before a session, let's say they're saying, my intention today is to release stress because my boss wasn't so nice to me today and I'm feeling angry. you would then say, what I'm hearing you say is that you're feeling angry and you have some stress in your body and you're looking to resolve that throughout today's breathwork session. And then you get them to go a little deeper. Like, is there anything else that you'd like to share about that? Or was there a moment in particular that you'd like to process? Or did it bring anything up for you from the past that this reminded you of? And so that gives them some time and space to just verbally dump what they're feeling, and you're just reflecting back to them. And anyone listening who finds that helpful, you should write down the phrase, what I'm hearing you say is, and then you just reflect back to them what they're saying. Now, with a child who is upset or crying, they, especially if they're very young, they don't know how they're feeling. So what you kind of have to give them the words that they're feeling so that they understand their emotions, but you ask it in a question rather than you're sad, you're not sad. We don't tell them what they're feeling, but instead, let's say they fall down and they're crying and their sibling pushed them over. You might say, "Are you feeling hurt right now?" And then the baby's crying. "I'm sorry, it's okay. Let me hold you." And you're just like letting it pass. And maybe you facilitate the sibling saying, "I'm sorry," but you might say something more of like, "Were you feeling upset that you were not able to share the toys?" Like you're kind of naming, like you felt this emotion because of this. And so you're helping to frame their psychology of learning why they're feeling a certain way and what things may cause that. And then you're helping them to feel normal about that. Like, it makes sense that you're feeling this way. Let's try this. Or can you say sorry to your sibling? Like, you're facilitating and giving them suggestions, and they're very malleable at that point in time. So the sooner we can teach them about what they're feeling, the more we set them up for success. So that's something I'm really passionate about too, because we can just give kids some, breathe normal, exhale longer than you inhale, but it's a lot more than that. It's the dynamic, it's how we're treating them, it's making sure that they feel safe to cry, and that crying is not a bad thing, but that they're allowed to cry and finish the full crying cycle, which is exactly like what circular connected breath does for adults. But what I say is fascinating is that for adults, it's like it's not always socially appropriate to cry or to release the energy. And so that's why doing circular connected breath once a week, or when it is appropriate, and having a big release, a big cry, and then you feel so much better. You feel connected to yourself. It helps you to not have that stagnant energy and that anger and resentment build up, because that is going to affect how you treat people that you're in relationship with. You're going to have this hostile energy in the household. And of course, your kids are going to feel that. So it's important that anyone listening here who is an adult, who maybe is going through some reactivity or things in your life that stress you, which I think is all of us, that you make sure that you have your own breathwork practice for adults.
Yeah. And I guess with what we talk about in functional nutritional therapy is the stress bucket, right? And so there's so many different factors that can enter that stress bucket and then add to it, and then it sort of overflows. And from what I'm hearing from you is that with the adult breath work, this is where there's like a time and a place for unpacking, or allowing the release of what may be in that stress bucket. And for children, it could be anytime, any place, because they haven't quite learned that, oh, that's not a right, that's not what I should do here. They're very natural in their responses. And so they might be having these meltdowns anywhere and everywhere. And I've had this experience with my own children where I'm thinking, oh, there's a meltdown coming. Oh, there it is. And I'm like, oh, this is really inappropriate. But they're surely not thinking that it's inappropriate at all.
Right. They're just in the moment, being present, being
They're
kids.
just in the moment being kids. Yeah, exactly. So then when you talk about the difference between the breathwork for adults and the breathwork for children, it makes sense that there is more of with the circular connected breath that you speak of, that is that time and that place for adults to do that unpacking in a safe place and space for them. But
Hmm.
not necessarily needed for children because they're
Right.
expressing that ongoingly, but also
Mm,
when they
exactly.
are crying, to allow that to happen. And that's something
Yeah.
that I've been learning to move through as well, rather than shut it
Mhm.
down.
Yeah. Because it can be a lot for your nervous system, like, oh, big energy. It can feel like a threat to your energy and your nervous system. So the more calm you can be, the more that helps with the co-regulation as they're feeling crazy and you're feeling like, oh no, now I'm feeling crazier. If you can just really calm your breathing. And what helps me too, beyond just slowing the breath and breathing through the nose, is doing other self-soothing things. Like, for example, if I'm feeling stressed, I sway side to side. That's an example of how we can regulate and modulate our energy. Or I think about my feet getting really heavy. Like, my feet are so grounded right now. I'm so heavy. And that brings the energy down as well. Yeah. And, singing, humming, things like that are actually scientifically proven to stimulate the vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve in the body, which plays a very important role in relaxation. So, there's more to a mom holding a crying baby and humming or singing, because that's also calming her, which means I'm going to be a better co-regulator because I'm feeling calm. And then there's something soothing about the frequency of hearing a singing voice. Doesn't, you don't have to be a good singer, but the singing voice does a lot for the baby as well. So regulate yourself in the moment, allow the big emotions to happen. And, if you're a mom listening, you might have a lot of a need for kind of a way to dispel a lot of these um, big emotions and big moments of energy. I do think that one of the things that I see a lot of my clients who are moms struggling with is the always being on, like this nervous system that's like always like, what is my kid doing? Are they going to break something? And so I just really recommend having support. Like, how can you be creative and have support? Maybe that looks like, your kids have play dates at someone else's house so that you get a break, because I do believe that it's just like sleep, you need that time to do nothing, to feel not alert in order to come back to yourself.
Well, there's that regeneration time, isn't there, when you sort of hit pause, be it via sleep, like when you're going into sleep mode, or you're just taking a little bit of time out from the daily grind, that there
Yeah.
is that regenerative effect that can replenish oneself, for adults and kids alike. So that's a great tip there. That we as parents, caregivers, we need our own time as well, because again, if we're all sort of energy somewhat, and then we're feeding into that grid, what we're going to bring to the table, so to speak, our energy, that's what our the children that are around us, are going to be picking up on, and then we're feeding through, that grid is feeding all that energy back and forth between us all. So it really is interesting, even when you spoke about when you self-regulate with rocking, and then we think about a mum or a dad, a caregiver, holding a baby and rocking a crying
Very
baby. So
natural.
very natural movements that are
Yeah.
soothing,
Hmm.
regulating, um,
Yep.
and
It's not just for the baby, it's also for yourself because you're holding a lot of energy physically. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And the singing and the humming, I think, are really beautiful ones.
Hmm.
And uh, we go with my youngest, we go somewhere where we get together. It's a homeschool co-op, and the teacher is Steiner trained, and she's so lovely. She does a lot of singing, and she's a great singer. And when we come away, all I hear my daughter doing is, like, we come away from our homeschool co-op session, my daughter's singing, and she'll be singing the rest of the day and even into the next day.
And
But
she's regulating herself. Yeah.
totally, exactly. So, and I'm not really a big singer, but I've also been leaning into humming when I'm doing certain activities
Yeah.
after
And do
learning
you
this
notice
from
that you feel more calm?
definitely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
Mm.
it's really fascinating. The little, somewhat what we would maybe potentially view as little activities that may not have much of an effect on our
Mm.
nervous system, on our sense of calm, we might have a lot more of an effect than we give it credit for. So,
Yeah.
um, we've talked about, breath work and how it can be helpful. What do you think in terms of breath work with children, how do you feel um, you talked about like a little example of the child who was learning breath work with his mum, and then he went off into the garden and did his own breath work. So, um,
Mm,
just a little bit of maybe the science or some information around how does breath work support children who are feeling the big emotions, who are having frequent meltdowns, and
yeah.
how does it affect the levels of anxiety that they're experiencing, but also elements like their sleep quality.
Yes, all of this is super important. And when a child is feeling stressed out, it's important to know that their brain and their body is going into a protection mode. So it's harder for them to think clearly. The brain shifts, and the amygdala, the part of the brain, basically is detecting, danger and saying, "Oh, we're stressed. Oh, we better protect ourselves." And then stress hormones are released. The same thing happens with adults as well. And so adrenaline and cortisol are released, and we have physical changes in the body. Again, both the same for adults and children, that the heart rate increases and the breathing increases, whether you know it or not. The breathing becomes more shallow, which is associated with a more stressed out breath, and the muscles can tense up. That's why a lot of times people feel when they're stressed out and they're getting a massage, it's like, why am I holding so much of my neck and my shoulders? It's from that chronic feeling stress and not having a way to dispel that, like breathing deeper into the belly. And so, yeah, at the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the busy monkey mind of the brain that is the part of the brain is that is responsible for reasoning and impulse control and problem solving, it becomes less available. So that's why it is very difficult to simply tell a stressed out, crying child who's melting down, calm down or make a better choice, because in that moment, their brain isn't fully there. So breath work can really help, because the breath physiologically is a influence to the nervous system. I like to call it the remote control of the nervous system. And there's certain qualities that we look at when it comes to breath work that make something more parasympathetic, which is the part of our brain that feels rest and digest. That is, improving sleep, feeling more calm. And then there's, styles of breath work that activate, which are more of the, releasing trauma for adults. So for anyone who's curious, the parasympathetic would be, breathing through the nose, long exhales, lying down, making sure your exhales are longer than your inhales, and all of that, or even humming too and singing, any of that is going to make something even more parasympathetic. So lying down, breathing in through the nose, humming out like that a few times can really calm things down fast. Of course, if we do this outside in the garden, lying on the grass, then that makes it even more parasympathetic, because now we have changing scenery, connecting to nature, grounding, all of the benefits there. And yeah, when it comes to breath that is more sympathetic or fight or flight associated, that is faster inhales, more emphasis on the inhalation, less emphasis on the exhales. Usually it's through the mouth. And it's very similar to how we breathe when we cry, which is why so many adults, when they do circular connected breath, they release trauma and they release so much from their body, because it's like your body is feeling the familiarity of crying. It's like, oh, I remember breathing this way when I cried. And so if your body is needing to release something, it likely will, because you're putting your body into that state that it's familiar and that it feels natural to cry and release a lot of those emotions. So yeah, for myself as an adult, like whenever I feel like, okay, there's a lot of energy that I need to move, or I feel like I could cry, I actually, it's funny, you might think to yourself, oh, she calms herself. But it depends on the moment, because if I am feeling it come on and I have the time and space, especially working from home, it is much better to just breathe deeper into it, allow the crying to have its cycle, and let it go. But if it's something where, I have an interview in a few minutes and I have to get it together, then those long exhales, breathing in really slow. The slower we breathe, the more parasympathetic it is, and the faster we breathe, the more sympathetic it is. Sympathetic, it can get a bad rep because it is associated with the fight or flight, but it's not always bad. And a lot of people ask me when they come to do our adult training, like, Adrienne, why are we breathing through the mouth? The mouth is not how we should normally breathe. The nose is how we breathe. And especially especially if they've read that very famous book, Breath by James Nestor, where he says noses are for breathing, mouths are for eating. I believe that that is an oversimplification and that it's actually just not true. And we do breathe through the mouth when we talk, because if I didn't, it would be really hard to understand me and it would sound horrible. That's me showing you. And then we do it when we sing, we do it when we swim. I grew up as a swimmer, so I think that I was kind of partial towards this open mouth breath because I'm like, oh, it's just like swimming. I was very used to it. Singers do this as well, although singers really have to breathe low and deep into the diaphragm. So it's this interesting thing where, yes, the mouth makes it more sympathetic, but they have to feel so relaxed in their body, or else the constriction of the vocal cords makes the sound wave not sound as good. I've taken a lot of singing lessons, and I'm surprised by how much breath work is involved in singing. But it makes a lot of sense, especially with long exhales, to train your nervous system and your carbon dioxide tolerance to increase so that you can hold a long note when you're singing without taking a breath halfway through. So yeah, there's a lot here, but yeah, when children can do breath work, it slows down the heart rate when they're slowing down their breath, and it helps relax the muscles. It helps to lessen the intensity of what they're feeling, and the body settles a little bit faster. Yeah, and so then once they're feeling more calm, this goes with adults as well. When someone's feeling calm is when you should have the conversation. That's when they have access to the part of their brain that can process a conversation, that can have emotional awareness, that can have focus and choice. And so, yeah, it becomes very difficult to have a conversation with someone who's very stressed out. That's why, fighting couples, they're yelling at each other. They're not in their regulated state. It's like, okay, we're feeling regulated or dysregulated. Let's go calm and then let's discuss. Never have a conversation with anyone of any age when you're both feeling dysregulated.
Yeah. And it's funny because sometimes that's exactly what we want to do. We want to keep going at it so we can just sort it out. Um,
Right.
but not necessarily going to happen. So again, pause, breathe, walk away, come back. It does make
Yeah,
things a whole
it
lot better
does.
and
Different.
break
Yeah.
that circuit breaker, right? Like you mentioned, even before, go outside, get out in nature,
Yeah.
ground, and just bring in something a little bit different, change it up, then come back and try and sort it out when everyone is more calm. If it's two adults or it's an adult and a child or it's two children, that you encourage them just to take a step back.
Separate for a little bit. Yeah. Breathe a
Exactly.
little bit. And then okay, 5 minute timer on. Okay, we'll talk about this in 5 minutes. Just let it settle a little bit. Yeah. Hmm.
Awesome. And in a like a fast-paced society, yeah, we want to do it all then and there, right? And I think even just talking about this topic of breath work, there is this, I guess it brings us back to that slow pace being beneficial, that we can slow down, take that pause, and then down the track, the benefits are so much more than if we kept just going, going, going on many different fronts, including, the argument front, but much more than that as well.
Yeah,
So,
I'd love for you to share, like, what have you seen with your own children with meltdowns? I know you know a lot of styles of breathwork for kids now. Like, what has been the most responsive for your kids and also for yourself?
yeah, so my three kids have been, well, they are different ages. So I have a 7-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So the 13-year-old is very much a teen, in the making right there. So what has worked for the 7-year-old has been a little bit different for the 13-year-old. And that's what you talk about in your certification course that I've moved through, that there is these differing
Mm.
styles of breath, but not necessarily all that different, but maybe the approach to them. So that's what
Yeah.
I found, because the teen doesn't want to do all the playful, the real
Yeah.
silly
They
stuff
want to be
unless,
cool.
yeah, exactly. He wants to be cool unless he's in that playful mode, he's much more cool. And so I have to approach it from that end. But yeah, super beneficial. It's really interesting because that was going to be a question of mine to you, but I found that my youngest actually took to it so much more easily than my 11 and 13-year-old.
That's why I
Um,
think it's so important to start young when they're like, okay, I'll learn anything. They're so moldable at that point. Yep.
Yeah, so and so that's what I found, and I find that my youngest, yes, she'll definitely, like even last night, she woke up and then we just moved through some simple breath work. It was like you mentioned before, breathing in through the nose and then out through the nose a little longer, or out through the mouth, whatever she was comfortable with. So she was doing a bit of both. And then I also said, how about we do which you speak of in your certification course, let's do the smell the roses, blow the candle. And she's like, Mum, I don't need to do the smell the roses and blow the candle. I do it just naturally myself now. That same
Wow.
sort of that pace that, you
She
know,
doesn't have to imagine anymore. Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that was really interesting. And then and one another instance I'll share for those who are interested, and for you, Adrienne, as a little bit of feedback. I think there was one night we were away with all three kids, all horsing around quite a bit. And it's getting late, and myself and my husband were getting tired. So when we're getting tired, there's a line. So we're all like, "Oh, we're at that line." So I went in, and my kids were sharing a room, like, let's do a little bit of breath work. So my son was horsing around quite a bit, cooking him a bit to calm down. And that was okay. I was allowing him to do that, but it was a little triggering for me as well. Like, oh, he's not calming down. Um,
Yeah.
but but it was really interesting because, like we talked about before, allowing things just to move through as well and not be so forceful. So I allowed him to keep horsing around a bit. But then we all kicked into a bit of a mode, with the breathing and the breath work. And then they all calmed down. I put them to sleep. And then the next morning, my two daughters mentioned that they had a really good night's sleep because of that
Mm.
breathing activity
Oh,
that we did before
good.
bed. And that was really beautiful.
I love that they said that. Yes. And I love that you're naming the differences with your kids. And for anyone here listening who's like, but my kids are not 3 to 5, like, will it be too late to learn? I definitely think that it's never too late. It just might take more repetitions because it's something they're not used to. And maybe they don't have proper breathing yet and they don't connect to the benefits. And with that middle age group of kids around 7 to 12, I find that telling them just a little bit about the science and telling them, a little bit about what's happening in their body and that this is a tool that they have with them at all times can feel really empowering and get them bought into it. And then when it comes to teens who feel like they're so cool, they don't need it, giving them choice and connecting it in to something that they already care about is the way to get buy-in for them. So, with your son, like, I don't know if there's like music that he likes. Maybe there's some music that he enjoys, even if it's a popular band that makes him feel calm. It's like, okay, what song do you want me to put on right now? Let's do our breathing to this song. And so it's kind of pairing it to them. They get to choose something. They're doing it for you. They're going to feel calm through it. And music does regulate us as well. That's a tool that is really beautiful to put on. And what I like about, let's all breathe to a song right now is that it's probably 3 or 4 minutes. So it's just like, okay, now the song's over. And the whole family feels better. The whole family feels more regulated. And then with teens, they usually either care about sports or singing or, being on Broadway. They care about something. Maybe they're really studious. And there's a really easy way to just show them, oh, this breath work will help you with this. Like, it really helps with anything, but just tell them specifically what they care about. Like, oh yeah, you want to get better at, your track mile time. Like, okay, let's do this breath work and I'll help you with your CO2 tolerance. And we're going to get you that states. And they're like, yes, now they're on my side. And then you go from a parent who's like, you need to do this, you're too overactivated, to I'm on your side. I want to help you win. I'm going to give you this edge that no one else on the team has. We're going to get you to win. And, that's all kids want. They want to feel connected. They want to feel seen and heard. And giving teens, especially, choice really matters and makes it so much easier.
Yeah, so that they're not being told what to do, but there is
Exactly.
these activities you can engage in. You can choose, and what I found is it's a little bit everything actually. Even working with adults as practitioners, that we are planting seeds. So the seed is not necessarily going to be growing, super fast right then and there. It might look like the child, especially the teen, is not interested, but we keep, returning to planting those seeds. And then over time, especially if it's connecting with something they feel very, they care about and is really important to them at that time, that they will engage with that activity. Because what I've also found is the breath work for kids, really simple activities, really simple, nothing too too intense. So that's really helpful as well. That any child of any age can really get into it. Now, if parent we'll have parents and caregivers listening to this interview, Adrienne. Um, so what is one thing that you would like to tell a parent or caregiver that they could do tonight with their
Mm,
child?
yeah.
Um, in terms of breath work or, getting into it a little bit with their child.
Yeah, one of my favorites is heart coherent breathing. And what I love about this is that it is the science of alignment. There are studies that have taken, EKG machines and all that, like the waves of the heart and the brain, and they see how chaotic it is. And then when you start breathing in for 5, out for 5, the waves of the brain and the heart look beautiful and they're so connected. And so I love this because it's something that you can do with your child. It's a great tool that I believe any age would benefit from. And then, if your kid is super young, like look at what you have around the house already and like be really like fun with it. Like give them a little slinky. I have this here on my desk just in case you ask me about something like this. And let's breathe in for 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then they start doing it. It's like, okay, now do you want to try? And people, or kids especially, they love trying. Like, give it to me. I want to try. I want to feel it. They're very tactile. They want to touch everything. They want toys. And then if they're getting really good at it, maybe you show them this, which is a little bit more expensive than the slinky. And you say, oh, if you're good, maybe I'll get you a Hoperman spear for your breathing. And they're like, whoa, like all the colors. And inhale for 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so that's something that gives them a physical thing that they can hold, something that they can look at, something that they feel they're connected to, and that they can have a lot of fun with it. And so with kids get bored easily. You probably have to shift things fast. And so you can do heart coherent breathing, but teach it in 1,000 different ways. I've got this little pinwheel here. Let's see if we can make it blow for 5 seconds, right? And so you make it go together, and little harmonica. Let's see if we can make a sound for 5 seconds, right? And so you just try it in different ways. Like, oh, do you want to blow up a balloon? Let's see how many seconds it takes to blow it up. And really, you're tricking them into doing a long exhale, which is scientifically proven to get you into that parasympathetic nervous system, and also helps to strengthen the lungs and to, build the diaphragm's capacity to breathe deep. The one thing that I'll say is, if your child isn't getting it yet, find something that they're good at and then just come back to that skill later. You always want to leave on a positive note with everything you do. For anyone here who homeschools their kids or, teaches their kids something, maybe there's a subject that they're really struggling with. Don't give up. Just know that they may need a few more reps in that area. But to make them feel like they're progressing and make them feel like they're smart and good at something. I think a lot of people have trauma from teachers who said one little thing and then it totally made them feel not good enough. And there's a lot of studies out there that show, kids and how they turned out in their 30s if the parents simply gave praise based on their effort, like, wow, you tried so hard. I'm so proud of you. You gave it your all. Versus the parents who parented of, you got an A plus. Oh, you got a 99. Oh, you got this, like a very specific results oriented, that those people did not flourish in life because they felt like they couldn't fail. And so I think a lot of this, parenting is an opportunity to do things different. When you think about how you would have wanted to be treated, you have opportunities to do that. And I think one of the best things that parents can do listening besides breath work is to build more of that emotional connection at home in the family. I know for myself, I growing up thought my parents never had struggles. Like I did not see them cry often. I did not really remember them talking about how they felt. So I just thought that they were just perfect. And so that illusion of like, oh, they're not telling me how they feel and so they must just feel fine. It made me feel like I had to go through all of my emotions alone. So it wasn't like they were not available for me emotionally. They were, I just didn't know that because I thought that they were perfect. And so I kind of put them on a pedestal and that created a disconnect. And it wasn't until later with, as an adult, when I found breath work and healed a lot, that I was able to form that bond, that emotional closeness with my parents. So it's never too late. But, when you're at home, share verbally how you're feeling. Like, oh, mommy just got home from work and I'm feeling really exhausted. I'm feeling like I just need to sit down on the couch. Like saying how you're handling things verbally models to children like, oh, it's okay to be tired sometimes. Oh, it's okay to do nothing. Like, I don't remember many times that I saw my mom doing nothing. And there's not many times that I'm doing nothing either. And so, with someone myself who has ADHD, I found that the best ways to do nothing are still to do something, which is breath work, which technically is still active, but it feels doable enough that I can still get to that feeling of calm, or taking a warm bath, or in the summertime, going outside and just lying out on the patio and getting some sun. It's like technically I'm still, but it feels like I'm just absorbing the energy of the sun. So doing something active enough but is calming is the way that I've kind of taught myself to do nothing. I can't just lie on the couch. I don't think I'll ever be that person. But I can use these other ways, or listening to music. I can lie down and listen to music. That's fine. It feels like I'm doing something enough. So yeah, I think, finding out what works for you. I know a lot of parents listening to this probably have kids with ADHD. I do believe it is a superpower. I know a lot of entrepreneur friends who are also ADHD. And so I would say cultivate whatever is their natural zone. If they're really creative, get them to do more of that. Like figure out what their zone of genius is and really cultivate that. Give them opportunities to try new things. Maybe there's an entrepreneurs club, like get them to try things and see where they excel. I think that's something that I'm seeing parents nowadays do that I really love and respect because, back in when I was growing up, a lot of the parents were like, you need to go to an Ivy League college, and you need to be the best in your class, and you need to be the valedictorian, and you better be an engineer or a doctor. Like there was a lot of that. And there wasn't a whole lot of room for creativity being seen as something that's a valuable skill. It was more of a hobby. And so I think there's so much changing in our world, especially with AI coming out, that, will engineers exist? I don't know. But I believe that someone who thinks creatively can create their own abundance and have their own business and solve problems in a million ways and not see something as a roadblock just because it's finite. So I hope that helps.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Some really great tips there, Adrienne. And creativity can come in so many different forms, right?
Yeah.
It's
It could just
being
be in
even
thinking
creative.
out of the box. It doesn't have to be art. Yeah.
No, it doesn't have to be art or music or something that we would associate creativity with. It could be being creative even with math and
Yeah, problem
science and stuff
solving.
like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like what are all the
definitely.
creative ways that we could get to the end of this puzzle? Yeah. Hmm.
Totally. Exactly. Exactly. So thank you for sharing all of that with us. This is great. Um, we're going to finish up soon, but I want to get this question in. If kids learn healthy breathing habits early, we've talked a little bit about the science and all, but let's wrap this one up. If they were to learn healthy breathing habits early, what does that actually set them up for later in life?
Mm. A more regulated nervous system, for sure. And it matters so much that kids learn this because the breath influences everything, including the body, the nervous system, the brain, their sleep. Sleep is so important for kids. They're growing, they're going through so much. That's how they recover when they're learning and how they actually retain information. It impacts their digestion, even their posture, which is important, emotional regulation. And while breathing is automatic, it's also one of the few functions that we can consciously change. So it does give them this source of empowerment where it's like, I can shift how I feel. I am not a victim of my emotions. I can be with my emotions, allow them and accept them, and then move through them faster using this tool that is the breath. So what I love about it is that it really teaches empowerment because, as kids are growing and their bodies are changing and they're going through different phases of school and navigating things socially, having something that empowers them to know that they are in control of what they're feeling, I think is probably the biggest benefit. The other biggest benefit would be if we could teach proper breathing, then they will be more healthy on a scientific level. So a body that sleeps well, that digests well, that has all of these proper functions because they feel regulated is going to have a lesser chance of, getting sick or having some sort of chronic illness. And so to have the healthiest kid possible, getting their nervous system regulated through proper nose breathing, which is deep belly breaths, breathing in and out through the nose, properly using the diaphragm and belly, that really matters. But yeah, even something as small as, your tongue position. The tongue position should be at the base of the front teeth. So kind of like at the top, just kind of resting there. And, science shows that that kind of just lifts a little bit. And I remember going to a chiropractor one time and they said, "Oh, did you know that for every inch your head is forward, it adds an extra bowling ball, 10 pounds to the weight of your spine that your spine has to carry? It's like working hard for nothing." And so that's something we have to be aware of. And, I know a lot of moms put their kids in front of a screen because that's how they get a rest. Like, I'm so busy, just here's a tablet. And I totally understand why they do this as like almost like a little babysitter. But one thing is that I've never seen someone use an iPad who has good posture. They're always slouched, their neck is craned, they're breathing, they become mesmerized in the screen. And so their breathing stops, it becomes irregular, it becomes very shallow. And so a lot of this is not just teaching proper breathing, but it's like monitoring, how are they most of the time? How is their posture? Like, what are the things and the factors in their environment that are going to pull them in? And it's not that I believe that kids shouldn't have screens, but I firmly believe kids should play outside every day. And I firmly believe kids should laugh every day and be in nature and be creative and figure things out on their own. So yeah, I hope that helps and inspires someone to think, okay, maybe my kid just needs some breaks. Maybe they, do their homework on their computer and then they go outside and, just having more of that interaction will help to raise a child that has body awareness.
Yeah, body awareness. We'll leave it at that. That's key, right? And the breath brings that awareness back into the body, so there's less disconnect and searching for the answers outside. Like part of your journey, Adrienne, coming to
Right.
breathwork and realizing there's a lot within us that we can work with, and really, essentially, all the answers reside within us. So, in terms of your kids' breathwork facilitator program, and you've got the adult one. What was it like building this program, or both of them, but essentially the kids one? I've moved through it and I think it's fantastic, so highly recommend it. And what do you hope facilitators like myself that take your program take away, from that
Yeah.
training?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun building the kids certification. Part of what I did was I brought in guest experts and I had them teach on their expertise. We had someone talk about nutrition, someone talked about, trauma and the effects of that on children. We had therapists come in. So I'm a big believer that, we can learn through many sources. So that is where I looked first. So like, let me find all of the other things that I would want to know. And I do have a gift of thinking creatively. And so I started with like, okay, what are all the things that are necessary and needed to know? And finding all of the science that backs it up. And really, it's pretty simple. The simplest part to describe breathwork for kids is understanding fundamentally how breath influences the nervous system. And then the biggest part is actually what I find the most fun and fascinating, which is the playful part. And it's the psychology part of how can I make my kid actually do this? How can I teach it in a way where they're not gonna, tell me I'm silly and like disregard what I'm saying. Like, how can I have this rapport and this connection with my child? I think that what I love seeing the moms, especially that are going through the course, say is that they feel more connected to their kid. And so it's not something that is meant to be like, you go do your breathing, you're in trouble. It's supposed to be a source of connection. It's supposed to be of, this is what I'm learning. Let's try this together. And being very patient with it. The mom who I shared about her son going outside, when she submitted her test out, I was blown away. Her test out was so long. Usually the test out is like 5 minutes showing a breathwork pattern. But for her, it was like 15 minutes. And she read her child an entire story that built up all the way to hot chocolate. And she says, "Oh, would you like some hot chocolate right now? Here's some hot chocolate. It might be getting cold. Now let's do our hot chocolate breath. Let's cool the hot chocolate." And then she finished, it was very short, like 2 minutes, which is like, let's have a positive win and then come back to it at a later time. And she says, do you think maybe you'd want to do some more hot chocolate breath tomorrow? And he says, more now, now. And she is ready for more because it was so fun. And so the part that I think really matters, I mean, yes, there's so much science to breath, but when it comes to children, we've got to know psychology, we've got to know relationships, dynamics, we've got to know co-regulation, and we've got to know how to make it fun and make it matter to them. Otherwise, if we go to a 5-year-old and we say, oh, this is what's happening in your body, like they don't care. So, dumb down the science, make it relatable, make them feel like they have a choice. That's something that I like to teach parents as well, of, teach them 2 styles of breath work and then say, okay, which style do you want to do tonight? You want to do this one or this one? And that way they feel empowered. So you're training the skill of empowerment. And you've got your whole life with this child to teach them. So don't feel rushed. Don't feel discouraged if they're not getting it yet. They're gonna get there. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun to build that program. With the adult certification, I did something similar as well, where I brought in a lot of experts and just filled in the gaps first around what I felt that I still was needing to know that I hadn't seen in other trainings. And then what I really made my own for the adult certification, that is now my favorite part of the course, is the art of facilitation and using your voice as an instrument to really take people deeper, almost like being a motivational speaker, but guiding someone so deep that they connect to their soul, because it's more than just words. It's more than just saying inhale, exhale. To really bring the passion and the energy makes all the difference. So that's something I'm really passionate about there. And anyone who's listening who wants to find out more, you can go to breathofgold.com and check out either one of our certifications. And we also do have a free breathwork for adults on there. That is on Sunday evenings in the US or midday on Mondays if you're in Australia. And you can come and breathe with me live. And we have different themes. Sometimes it's around healing, sometimes it's around clarity. I recommend it for all adults to try and to experience it, because once you try circular connected breath, you may have an experience like me where you kind of wake up to the importance of it. It was always something that I just felt like, oh, it's not that important. Oh, I'm breathing. I don't have to worry about this. But then once I found circular connected breath and that it could make me cry and release all this, then I thought I better start paying attention to the breath for sleep and to the breath for lowering my energy during times that I'm needing to lower stress, and to breathe properly to have a more regulated nervous system. And all of those things have brought me so much benefit.
So wonderful. And we'll pop all that information in terms of your 2 facilitator certification programs, as well as the free offering that you offer in terms of moving through a breathwork session with you on that, that you offer on a weekly basis. This has been wonderful, Adrienne. I think you've moved through some really important, simple, and pliable information that can be applied so easily for parents, caregivers, but also for practitioners who may be thinking that they want to do a little bit more work for themselves, maybe also on their client front in terms of breath work, either be it adults, kids, or both. So thank you so much for sharing all that information and your wisdom and your energy as well. I'm coming away from this interview feeling inspired again. You did instill that playfulness in the program. And I think that's really important reminder each and every day, because we can get bogged down with a lot of stuff and a lot of to-do items on our list, and forget about, being in the now, the here and the now, and enjoying it. And play for both kids and adults can, bring so much joy to the here and the now, and to what we're doing in the here and the now, and all of that. And then, obviously it benefits our health in so many different ways. So thank you again for your time and your energy.
Yes, thank you so much again for having me.
So, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Vodcast. We hope today's conversation with Adrienne has encouraged you to stay curious and playful, and also bring awareness or a reminder to the how powerful the breath can be in children's health, but also in our own health as adults as well. And when we're looking after children in that co regulation type relationship. So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with others if you feel like they'd be interested in, could benefit from it as well, especially with Adrienne's little tips on the slinky. I've got plenty of those around. I'm going to bring those out and make use of them. But share it with anyone that you feel like would benefit, be interested, and follow along for more conversations like this. So until next time, stay well.